Well, welcome to another edition of Getting to Know Your Indiana Neighbor, and this one should be fun, at least for us. I don't know about you. Been waiting for this for a long time. It's getting to know your Indiana and Arizona brother. For those of you that don't know, this brother is my oldest. This is Mark Bateman. Mark, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back to Indiana.
I watch these all the time, and I'm glad to be a part of one.
Hey, good. Well, we're going to talk about the beginning of this because Mark's the brainchild of getting to know your neighbor. Have you ever been called a brainchild of anything?
Brain and myself have not been used in the same sentence in a long time.
Well, it has today. It has today. So we're going to talk about a lot of things, and it's up to you whether you want to hang with us or not. I've got a lot of things written down that I remember from Mark's childhood and even adulthood that I want to make sure we cover because I consider Mark one of those people, and there are a few out there, they're like Forrest Gump, always kind of in a place where something's happening. Brian Bruner, you're one of those. But that's interesting. So hopefully we'll be bringing out some of that today. Some of you may not remember Mark, but he is a part of the Bateman family. Like I said, he's the oldest child. But many of you will. He's the class of 1974. And Mark, let's just first start. The Indiana Neighbor, that's my title. Mm-hmm. Your title was Getting to Know Your Neighbor.
Right.
And you had that concept out in Arizona. Tell me the beginnings of it, why you thought that might be a good idea.
Well, how it started was we had a business out there at one time called Flicko's Video Service. And what we did was we transferred old 8mm film, 16mm film, audio, video to digital. Well, I just started seeing the most interesting people come into our office. I mean, one guy was a former pilot for Air Force One. We had people who were POWs in the war. And I used to think, this guy's somebody's neighbor. Yeah. And they probably don't know anything about him, and what an interesting story. Yeah. And I just thought, I'd like to do this. And at the time, I actually took the concept to a television station in Tucson, and it was going to cost money to produce. And so they weren't really interested. So it kind of just went by the wayside. And then when I retired, I had a little bit of time on my hands. And so I thought, well, now I can do it whenever I want, and I can just stream it on YouTube or Facebook. And so that's how I started doing it. And I've done a few, and then you started doing them, and they were so good that I thought I've got to stop and just let
No. No, Mark got a little busy remodeling a house that he bought, amongst other things, and I'm sure they'll start back up. But the whole concept that I have, including the open, the close, came from Mark, and then the reason I got involved. Bernie Landon. I have a feeling we're going to bring Bernie's name up a lot. I mean, the Landon.
Well, we should.
We should. Very important part of our childhood. Uh-huh. But Bernie Landon said, "Greg, you should do this in Loogootee. There are a lot of interesting characters, and there are."
Well, what I find it's actually two different things. In Tucson, obviously it's a bigger city, and so you can do people who maybe that someone has heard of them or knows of them, but they don't know them. In Loogootee, everybody kind of knows everybody, but they don't really know all of their backstory, and you kind of provide that, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I think what resonates with most people, at least the feedback I get, are the memories, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you go back and who you hung around with, and we'll get into that as well. But when I'm out and about, people will say, "Oh, I remember this, I remember that." You're bringing back so many good memories, and that's what we want to do. Just something for you to enjoy. But I remember telling Bernie, Bernie, I have no idea how to get this started, the editing, or maybe I told you that, I don't know. And you helped me along, and I'm still working on it, but it's a lot of fun, and I've had an opportunity to talk to a lot of fantastic people.
They're really interesting. I really enjoy, and even people that I know, I always find out stuff that I didn't know about them, here in Loogootee. So it's really fun to watch.
Yeah, and we're going to find out a few things about this guy that I probably haven't even known. And keep in mind too, he's 5 years older than me. And he left really what age of, I don't know, 19, 20?
19, 20, yeah.
Yeah, so he's been gone for 91 years now, or thereabouts. Almost. So I don't know him maybe as well as some of his closest friends, but that's the way the Indiana Neighbor got started. It was out in Arizona, and it was just called Getting to Know Your Neighbor, but it's a great idea. So let's start, Mark, from the beginning, as I often do if you watch these kind of chronologically. What you don't know about Mark is he was born amongst the aliens in Roswell, New Mexico.
And every time I tell somebody that, they say, "Oh, that explains everything."
Mark was born in Roswell, New Mexico.
Roswell, 1956.
Yeah. What were the circumstances there?
Dad was in the service and stationed in Roswell, and Mom came out there, and that's where I was born. And I was just there a few weeks. And
Yeah.
from what I understand, Mom and our grandmother, my dad's mom, got on a train and rode us
Yeah.
back to Loogootee.
Yeah, I bet that was a fun train ride there. So you're there a few weeks. What are your best memories of Roswell?
Well, just hanging with the aliens.
Just hanging with the aliens. You know, when you think of your childhood, and I know when I think of mine, I don't know, there's three or four things that just instantly pop in my mind. When you think of your childhood, and let's start maybe with preteen, all right? So,
Yeah.
because once you got into the teenage years, it was a whole different ballgame. But let's think preteen. What immediately comes to mind?
Well, playing ball in the backyard,
Yeah.
our backyard, everybody's backyard. But I remember our backyard, and God bless Mom and Dad. We had base paths worn in the grass, where we were at. Well, the basketball goal was just dirt. But then when it would rain, we would still play, and it would be mud. And remember how you just have mud on the tips of your fingers, which actually was pretty good shooting for them because the ball never hit the palm of your hand. But just I remember climbing up on the roof to get the foul balls, and I can remember one time, and probably many times, stamping around up on the roof. And I remember Mom saying, "Are you boys up on that roof?" And I jumped off the roof and said, "No." But just but again, playing ball, and all the neighbor kids. I mean, everybody. T.J. Butcher and Tim Butcher and Bernie Lannon, as you mentioned, and the Sheetses.
Yeah.
Hudson's. Oh my gosh, yeah. We would just
Bowman's, True Loves, all right there in the
somehow or
neighborhood.
another we would find somebody's backyard to play ball in, and that's just what we did constantly.
I remember in our backyard we had aluminum siding.
Yeah.
Didn't really think anything of it, but that was our catcher, the aluminum siding.
Yeah,
We'd play wiffle ball or what have you, and all of a sudden you'd look back and there'd be dents in it. We didn't care.
Yeah.
We didn't know.
Well, and remember too, and would play when it was cold outside. When Mom would run the dryer vent was out, and you could go into there and warm your hands up.
And of course, we, just like most of you did, we had a trash can that if you hit it in there, it's a grand slam. Or if you hit it out in the cow pasture, it's an out.
Over the fence, and then we had to climb over the fence, and that didn't set well with the neighbors who owned the fence.
We didn't know why, right? But it didn't. Yeah. You remember? You were still around when Bernie Truelove. He had some acreage out there, and he built a baseball diamond.
Right,
backstop and everything, and a dirt infield, and we had the whole neighborhood. In fact, we had the North Siders come down.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was a baseball field that Bernie did for us.
Dad was coaching Little League with Bernie Truelove.
Yeah.
So we had all the equipment. I mean, bases, catcher's equipment, bats, balls. It was really the South Side baseball field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that was great. But so who were the people that you hung out with? Let's again stay preteen.
Well, probably starting with the kids in the neighborhood who we mentioned, but also going to the swimming pool.
Oh boy.
That was we could just walk over there, and we spent a lot of time there. And that's where I met. Of course, we went to St. John's School, and that's where I met some of the kids early on from the public school. That's where I first met Tony Page and probably Wayne Flick and of course Steve Bradley, a good friend of mine. I'd go to his house and we'd go to the pool.
Right next door.
Yeah. So I met a lot of kids there. But then when I got into Little League, we would play with other kids from the public school. Alan Crane, who was a lifelong friend. Again Wayne and Tony and Steve Bradley and Benny Bloodsaw and of course Steve Sheets and Bernie Land and T.J. Butcher and just all those guys. That's kind of the swimming pool and the baseball diamond were probably the two places you spent the most time at.
You remember the thing in Little League, if you got a base hit, your name was in the Tribune.
Oh, yeah.
And that was a big deal. In fact, Mark, I was just going through some of Dad's items just the other day, photo albums and such, and there was an article in there from the Tribune where I guess you were the Yankees. Does that sound familiar?
I don't remember.
But anyway, you won the game, and Mark Bateman and Kevin Bateman both had singles, and it was in the paper, and that was a big deal.
Well, remember too, if you get a home run, the Dog and Suds gave you a free gallon of root beer, and I remember getting 0 gallons of root beer.
I got as many as you did. Never even came close, but some people did. There was
Junior Hudson. I used to see him walking home with 2 or 3 gallons of root beer under his hands, because I mean that guy was a monster. Yeah.
You think of the swimming pool. and I know you do it too, but especially product of the '70s, what have you. How many times are you listening, whether it's Sirius XM '70 station, and you hear a song and immediately
Oh
you think
yeah,
that's a swimming
yeah.
pool song?
Well, I used to take. I remember I bought an album, a Creedence Clearwater Revival album, and I would take it over there so they could play it. And you had the big loud speaker, that would play
Yeah,
the music on.
yeah.
So yeah, you take your own music.
Here's another memory I have of the swimming pool. Let's see if you remember this. So you were a teenager by now, and you were going off the diving board, and you were you were showing off, and you remember a gainer?
Yeah,
Can you
sure.
explain to people what a gainer is? Because I can't, but you were
Well,
able to do it.
you're moving forward on the diving board, and when you take a bounce, you do basically kind of a back flip, but you're facing forward still. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So you had like one and a half and two
Yeah.
and a
Yeah.
halves. Well, I remember you going up one time, and it didn't quite work out, and you came out of the pool, and you were cussing up a storm. You remember this?
Yeah. Well, I think what I remember is
Well, you're gonna okay.
somebody asked because I hit my back and it smacked on the water, and I think I went hell or something, and if I remember right, mom and dad were sitting out on the fence watching her. That's what I remember.
Well, I think what I had heard was our Aunt Rita had heard it somehow and related it to
Oh, I don't
mom.
remember that.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll never know. We'll never know that. But I'm guessing that might be a time you got grounded.
Well, I remember, if my memory is correct, and it's probably not, but I remember at that time, I think I was going off to school, Latin school. We'll probably talk a little bit
We'll
about
talk
that.
about that.
But I think I remember mom saying something about you going to Latin school and talking like that.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
So, over or under 5? How many times were you grounded?
Oh, 5?
Is that low? Is that low?
Oh gosh, well over. I mean,
Huh.
well, I mean, you're just a kid and you're mischievous and
Yeah. Where are you now? Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. What were some of the things that you got into that got you grounded? And
Well,
by the way, we agreed that there are no questions off limit. Now, he can pass if I ask him a question that he's not comfortable with or he thinks might embarrass one of you. But what are some of the things
well,
you
I think
got?
one of the things I probably the most was staying out after curfew. Because I remember, like, me and Steve Bradley, I think when we were sophomores, I was like 14 or 15, and we would hang around guys like Billy Harbison and Ed Nolly, who were seniors, and they were 18 at that time. Well, some of you may not remember, there was a curfew at
Yeah.
11 o'clock. You
Yep.
had to be in. I think the siren would go off at 15
Yep,
till,
quarter till, yeah.
and that meant you
Get on that
be on
bike
your
and
way home. And we would be riding around out, in their car, and Joe G would pull us over. And how old are you boys? 18. How old are you? 14. And then I'd be out after curfew, and I think I was probably in trouble for that a few times.
Back then we talked about Joe G a lot because basically he and Wayne Wessel maybe
Yeah,
they were the law,
yeah.
and as teenagers you didn't really like the law that much, but I think we've all realized the Joe G's and how important they were because they were so fair.
Good.
They were so fair.
Yeah, they really were. Now that you look back on it, in hindsight, absolutely.
Yeah. Let's talk about Latin school a little bit. So,
Okay.
so those of you who don't know, if I remember right, it's Magister Noster Latin School,
Right.
Evansville, Indiana,
Mhm.
and it is basically, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a preparatory school for the vocation for the priesthood.
Yes.
All right. Now, Mark was an altar boy.
I think I was an all-star.
Yeah, an altar boy, all-star, but you were no choir boy.
No.
So you're going into your freshman year of high school. I don't even remember. So tell me, first of all, I know the intent was not to go to become a priest, but where did that idea come into your head, and you thought that it was a good idea?
Well, what happened was when the schools burnt down, and then the schools consolidated. So St. John's went to the public school. I was in the 8th grade, I think,
okay.
at that time.
All right.
So even though we were going into the public school system, we still had what they called catechism classes. We'd go down to the KFC,
Yeah.
and to give us some sort of religious teachings. And one time, some people from the Latin school came up, kind of like a recruiting visit. And they had a slideshow. They put a projector and a screen up, and you just told us about the school. And there was, I think, 6 of us that just decided what an adventure this would be. If I can remember, I hope I don't want to leave anybody out. It was me and Bernie Lannon, Mike Green, Jim Hart. I think Mark McAtee and Bill Toy went. Lee Weininger, Van McAtee.
Wow.
Yeah, but
This was like half the school.
well, I think it was Bill and Mark McAtee came their sophomore year. But the other six of us went our freshman year. But I think we just thought of it as an adventure, you know. And, we went, a school bus or a big bus would start in Vincennes and pick people up, go through Washington, Montgomery, Loogootee, Jasper, Dale, Huntingburg, Dale, and then on to Evansville. And we actually stayed down there all week, slept in dormitories. And I remember the first night, Mom and Dad dropped me off, and when they left, I mean, I thought, I don't know what kind of adventure this is, because I was homesick immediately.
Oh, see, now I would have never thought that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, after a few weeks, you get into the routine and stuff. And it was a tough school. We actually had study halls, 3 study halls at night after you had finished supper. And it's funny too, because if you were a freshman or sophomore, you had to what they called be on dishes. That meant for 2 weeks, either breakfast, lunch, or dinner, you had to do dishes afterwards. Now, if you got in trouble, you were on dishes the 2 weeks that you were off. And I think there was a stretch where I was on dishes for several months.
You know, that happens. You know, yeah, that happens. So, and so the end came eventually. Was it after 1 year? Did you finish
Yeah,
out
after
the
1 year, I think it was pretty clear to everybody involved that, you know, that probably wasn't the place for me. So I came back to Loogootee in my sophomore year.
Yeah. Memories of high school.
Well, a lot of good memories of high school, a lot of the people mainly, but probably my best memory was when I was a junior and played baseball. And we had a really good team. As a matter of fact, I always like to say I was a very mediocre player on a very good team. We were that close to going to the state finals.
Closer than that.
Yeah, I think there was 2 out in maybe the bottom of the 7th inning. Again, if my memory's right, we were though the game was tied or we were down a run, I don't remember. But Mike Grindstaff was on first base, and I think it was Riggins who hit a line drive between first and second, and Mike scored, and we thought we'd won the game and was going to the state finals the next week. But then and we were on the field celebrating, and then the umpire waved it off and ruled that the ball had hit Mike Grindstaff on his way between first and second and ruled him out, and we lost the game.
Yeah, and that's kind of been a controversy for now. Well, it's 50 years, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
well,
it's
I
50
guess,
years.
yeah.
It's 50 years. And I've seen Mike occasionally, and you'll ask him, and he'll go,
Well, that's a pretty good indication.
Yeah, I think
otherwise it would have been an emphatic no.
Yeah,
but
it might have nicked
but
him.
what a ride that was.
Yeah.
What a ride that was. And just some great ball players. I mean, several of those guys could have played college ball.
You know, one of those things, and I just found this out last night. Mark and I were on a little golf cart ride going by the school, and he said on those very steps, finish the story.
Well, I think it was me and Mark McAtee, if I remember right. It was lunchtime, and we were sitting out there, or just happened to be out there, and facing Jack Butcher Boulevard now, right?
Yeah, right.
And a horse and buggy with no driver went by. And we jumped in Mark's car and went out and corralled it. And we knew where it came from. Some of you may remember where the old IGA was. What's there now? Do you know?
Yeah, it's a church.
Oh, okay.
You mean where Scottway was? And
Yeah.
Right next to the post office.
But that's where the Amish shopped, and they had the railing for the horses. And,
that's right.
And we knew that's where it came from, and we corralled it and rode it back there.
Okay, so let me get this straight.
Yeah.
All right, so you guys see a horse and buggy go up with and you guys both decide, let's get in the car and let's go corral that thing.
Yeah.
And you rode the horse. So I'm picturing you with the reins. Is that fair or not?
Well, I guess. I mean, my memory is, I just kind of remember the episode. I don't remember exactly, but what I do remember is we both knew instantly where it came from.
Yeah.
It had to get loose from that IGA, and was going home.
Yeah.
But I'd forgotten all about that till we drove by that step.
Yeah. See, I never had that sort of adventure in high school. I never saw things like, and if I did, I would have said, and just let it go.
Yeah.
But you guys said, let's go get it, drive it back, and ride it back.
We were equally stupid.
Yeah, you were.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. First girlfriend that you can remember.
Well, I guess if I was going to say first, I would say the first real girlfriend, after I probably got my driver's license, I guess would have been Laura Parsons.
Oh yeah.
Laura was really sweet. She probably broke my heart. My first girlfriend. But then what's ironic is, I think it was probably about 15 years later. She had been married and then got divorced. But for some reason, I was living in Tempe, Arizona, and I was thinking about her, and I thought, why don't I just call her? And I did, and I didn't know how it would be received. Back then it was a long distance phone call. I had to pay for it. But she was super nice, super friendly, and we became pretty good friends. And so that was really nice. She's a real sweetheart.
You don't remember though prior to that any of the grade school where the old, hey, will you ask Mark if he'll go with me, and you never know if you're actually boyfriend girlfriend.
I don't. There was a girl, and I think her name was Denise Robinson, I believe. She was but that was, I don't know. I don't really remember too much about that.
Yeah, that was most of my girlfriends, like second to fourth grade. After that, didn't do much. But, yeah, I remember mine. I guess. Well, we just saw Nancy Jones.
Yeah.
That's Nancy McAtee. Well, it wasn't her, but it was her sister Lynn.
Oh. Okay.
And it was second grade. And Lynn, you hopefully you remember this, but well, hopefully you won't. But I told this story on occasion. And I think I was in Mrs. Hagerty's class, and I was up at her desk in second grade. And Lynn comes up and gives me a kiss on the cheek.
Wow.
So that's my first kiss,
wow.
Lynn McAtee. And if I remember, I kind of acted like I didn't like it, but I really remember her going something like, ooh, something like that. But Lynn McAtee. And then I remember Alice Patterson. And Alice is still a dear, dear friend. But here's my most heartbreaking story. So when we were really young and we lived on Poplar Street, we didn't have a phone. Remember that? Well, there was a while where we didn't have a phone. We had to go over to Joyce Bowman's house, and ask if we can use their phone. Probably for a short period of time, but we did. So it's fourth grade, and my buddies somehow are taking out their girls to the theater, right? To the Indiana Theater. I was thinking Friday nights, but it probably was Saturday since it was fourth grade. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to get the guts and ask Alice to the theater. So I walk over there all hesitant. I call Alice, and she says no.
Oh.
Yeah, she says, no, I can't go. So I'm leaving, and I'm walking back, down the hill and back to the house. And who's out there but Milky? Remember John Williams?
Sure, yeah.
He was the milkman. His dad had the milk truck, and he goes, I must have looked downtrodden, because he goes, you look like you just lost your best friend. And I thought, I didn't appreciate that very much, because I kind of had. But I did talk to Alice later on, a long time later, and she said that her dad would not let her go.
Oh,
she wanted to, but she's trying to probably make me feel
good. Now that you say that, we didn't have a phone. I do remember the Star Tavern. There was a phone booth there. And I remember, I don't remember what grade it was. It must have been 8th grade maybe, or something like that. But Valerie Nante. And I kind of, I don't know.
She's
she
beautiful.
Would call me,
right? Yeah, always.
But I would go up there and call her, and I was pretty sweet on her for a while.
A lot of people probably were.
Yeah. She was a great cheerleader, and really beautiful inside and out. She's really a great.
Still is.
Yeah, she sure is. And remains a great friend to this day. Yeah.
And I remember too, and we talked about this a little bit. When we did have a phone, we had the old party line, and next door were the Bowmans, and Doug and group. You'll remember this, of course. Your grandmother, Mabel Bowman. We couldn't get on the phone. We'd always get on. Mabel would be on it.
Party line.
Yeah, it was a party line, or somebody else. And sometimes you might listen in on the conversation, but more often than not, it's gotta wait.
Well, or be a wiseacre, and say something, or slam the phone down, and you can pick it up and you hear, oh, it's them Bateman kids on the party line.
See, I never did that. Did you do that a lot? Yeah, maybe.
Well, I thought everybody did.
No. We talked about Bernie Lannon a moment ago, and there's some video out there floating around.
Yeah, that's great.
And it's driveway basketball on YouTube. And you weren't there.
No, but you and Randy and I think T.J. Butcher and Tim and I remember.
Doug Bowman.
Now that you think about it, I saw that video. There was a kid from our Latin school named Ed Soniak.
I didn't know who it was, but there was. He was the big kid who would block all the shots.
Yeah, he came up to, I think, spend a weekend with Bernie or something.
Yeah, but Bernie, if I remember, he had the video, and he was playing, but somebody was videotaping it.
Yeah.
And there's a picture of Cindy Butcher, and we're probably showing the video right now, and Cindy kind of shies away.
Yeah.
But the Lannons were so big in our life. I remember, of course. And if you don't know, Bernie Lannon's dad and mom, they own the Dairy Master, right?
Yes.
They came in, and I don't know. Bernie will remind us. Did they buy it? Did they start it? I can't
They
remember.
bought it.
They bought it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Cecilia,
Yeah.
his mother, what a sweetheart.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah.
She, we would go down to Bernie's basement because he had a ping pong table, and she was pretty good. And so Bernie and I would spend hours down there playing ping pong. And as a matter of fact, Bernie was a pretty mischievous kid too. I don't know if he made a replica key to the Dairy Master, or just somehow got the key. But I would stay all night at his house a lot. We'd get up in the middle of the night and go down there and make pizzas and milkshakes.
Yeah. Wow. You guys were bad. Um, so I guess if we look at well, I'm just thinking, just popping into my head, somebody else that we kind of hung around with a little bit earlier, the Walton boys.
Oh,
Right?
Mark and Kenny and Gary. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
we lived up in a trailer right behind to where
The radio station.
the radio station is, Bell's Marathon,
Yeah.
for a little bit.
Yeah.
So they did too.
Yeah.
So we hung around them. Those were tough guys, but great guys.
Yeah,
And
great
we had a
guys.
blast with
Yeah.
them.
And good ball players.
Good ball players. They certainly were,
Yeah.
for sure.
You know, what's the what is it? A pizza place up on the hill there?
Biggins.
That used to be
Yep.
just a dirt. It looked like a drained pond. It just had a big circle around it and just a dirt floor. And we used to play ball up there a lot.
Yeah, Pete Bruner likes to talk
Pete
about
Bruner, yeah.
those days. And
We used to call you Cha Cha because of your affinity for
Orlando
Cepeda.
Cepeda. Yeah, first base.
Yeah.
Which reminds me too, I really don't have a memory of it. You would, but the first house, I guess, that I remember sort of that we lived in were what we called the Crane houses.
Yeah.
Right next to
Yeah.
the Blackwells.
Yeah.
Which, how am I going to describe that? It's actually right behind Biggins. Don't
Well,
even
if
know
you
the
were
street.
going up the highway and if you turned left, you'd go to Jack Butcher's house. If
Yeah.
you turn right,
Mhm.
past Pete Bruner's old
Yeah.
house, and go up toward that stop sign on the right
the
side.
stop sign being North Line Street.
Yeah.
So it's right there.
Yeah.
But I don't really have a memory of that. But so we lived there. We lived in that trailer, and then of course 314 Poplar Street that we've
Mhm.
had in the family since it was built.
Well, our grandfather, our mother's father, built it, I think, in the 40s.
Yeah. You reminded me of a story last night too, that we would play baseball, and sometimes we really didn't have the adequate amount of players, so we would.
Well, of course, Doug Bowman and Jeff Truelove
Yeah.
and TJ and Tim Butcher and Bernie and us, and we needed a second baseman or a shortstop, and we didn't care how athletically gifted you were or not. So sometimes Delphi'd come down, and she'd fill in the spot.
Yeah, Delphi Davidson, she lived in the neighborhood.
Yeah,
Gary
yeah.
Davidson, of course, Delphi was married to Joe Baker.
Yeah,
But yeah. I mean,
we needed players.
you wanted to play, and we did, and that's what we do. I remember too. We might bust a rubber ball or something and run up to Greenwell's,
Yeah,
and get it. And we're telling you these things, and because I know that every one of you, particularly the guys, had the same memories as we did.
You just different neighborhood.
Yeah.
You did everything we did, but
Yeah.
probably
And sometimes we got together with your neighborhood,
Yeah.
north side against south side.
Well, speaking of rubber balls, I remember we had an old garage out there in the backyard, and there were two big square rectangle concrete blocks side by side.
Yeah.
And I remember you in particular would sit out there for hours and throw that ball against the concrete, and it would bounce back, and you'd field it, and probably say Bateman throws to first in time.
That's exactly right. I never made an error on
No,
that.
yeah, you were good there.
But seriously, and I don't know if people do that anymore, but I was a shortstop, and that's where I practiced.
Yeah.
Those blocks, just throwing it back.
Yeah.
You'd get bad hops because those blocks weren't perfect. You had your seams.
Well, and you could put some spin on it, and it would bounce
Yeah.
one way or the other. So
Yeah.
it was.
I just don't know the kids do that anymore, but
They do it virtually.
they do it virtually. But it was common
Yeah.
back then. That's
Yeah.
the way people did. Youth center. I'm sure you've got some youth center memory.
Well, mainly playing basketball out there. But that was just a place where kids could go on Friday or Saturday night. If you were going to go anywhere and see your friends or people you knew, that's where everybody congregated. So
Yeah.
you could go in there and get a hamburger and a Coke and maybe play some ping pong or shoot a game of pool, that kind of thing.
Right. So you graduate high school. Well, wait a minute. I'm assuming.
I think we were all holding our breath, but yeah, I did.
And by the way, the senior picture that I put on Facebook, I always remember this. That wasn't your jacket. If you look at the class of 19, and where I got that, by the way, we're in the Loogootee Public Library, which I do these often, and thank you, Darla Wagger and the group, fantastic. But if you go on the Loogootee Public Library website, I don't even know if you know this, Mark, but you can get every yearbook You just download it. And I don't know how far it goes back or even St. John's. But so I went back to Mark's in 74 and got his. But if you do that, you'll also see Bill Toy in the exact same jacket, and you can't mistake it. It's that striped one. And so tell
Well,
me.
the story behind that is we were going to Huntingburg, I think it was,
Yeah.
to get our class pictures, and everybody had a jacket, and either I didn't have one or I just didn't know to wear one, or I had a shirt and I think a tie. And Bill Toy was just kind enough to say, well, you can wear mine. And we didn't even think that, it wasn't like it was just black or navy blue. It was, a jacket that, it was a very nice jacket. And he was just very kind to let me wear it. But, looking back now, maybe I shouldn't.
That's funny. What was I going to say? I'm trying to think of the name of that studio in Huntingburg. Doggone, I'm not going to. Yeah, that's okay. But Bill Toy comes to mind in another way, because this is my memory. I remember Bill working at the JC store, and Bill got a new car. Of course, it probably wasn't new to him. So I remember Mark saying, I want to work at the JC store because I want to get a car. And I'll be darned if he did.
Well, actually, my thoughts of working at the JC store started a couple of years before that. I mean, as a kid, everybody mowed lawns and did things, and I washed dishes at the Star and other places. But I heard the JC store was paying $2 an hour.
Wow.
And so I went down there, and I think I was 14, and they said, well, you have to be 16. So when I turned 16, I went back there, and I don't know if I got hired immediately, but at some point I found my way in the door, and I worked with Bill Toy and Daryl Bledsaw and Daryl Dye, Ed Snare and John Strange were managers, and I think the manager of the JC at the time was the head manager was named Larry. I can't remember, but that was $2 an hour, and then time and a half when you worked on Sunday. So that was a pretty good job, and I remember Dad wanting me to save up my money and buy it cash, but I wanted it right now, so we went out and I bought a 1974 Burgundy Nova.
Some of you remember that. No pictures of that?
No. $2,000, I think is what it cost.
$2,000.
Yeah.
Wow. No, it was sharp, and it was it a 5-speed?
3, I think.
3-speed?
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe so.
All right. I overestimated, but it's okay. But no, very, very sharp car. I remember you had the, like as a 16-year-old, the old, what was it, the Stroh's bottle cap on both of the radio tuners.
I look back on that. There was what do you call the tap on a keg?
Yeah.
And I unscrewed,
that's right.
I unscrewed the shift, the little knob on the shift, and screwed that on there, and just thought it was really cool for about a week, and then it was just hard to shift. I probably took it off, but you look back and think, that was silly, but I thought it was cool at the time, I guess.
Probably what I remember, the time that you got in trouble most, and I don't know how much you got in trouble, but it's a story where this was a different car, and you went out one night, and you came home without it, and you had no idea where it was.
Yeah. That was my first car. It was a 1966 Ford.
Yeah, Galaxy was.
Galaxy. Dad, I remember coming home.
By the way, Kevin, we know it was both yours and Mark's. It's been a source of controversy over the years. Yeah.
But I remember coming home one time, and Dad parked it in the backyard. It kind of surprised me. Boy, that was a great surprise.
I remember that.
Kevin and I. But actually, I think I'd gone to the Rustic. Obviously wasn't supposed to. And coming back was tooling around the back roads of Alfordsville or Whitfield back there. Drove off got on a little ditch and got stuck in there. Couldn't get it out. So I ended up walking across a field into Whitfield, and a good friend of mine brought me home, and I just went to bed. And I remember Dad waking me up the next morning and saying, "Where's the car?" And I didn't know. I mean, I knew whereabouts, but so Dad and Mom and I got in the car, and I said, "Well, let's head out this way." And eventually we saw it, and I don't remember how we got it out. But what I do remember is, I mean, that's kind of a major offense.
Yeah.
But I'm sure I got in some kind of trouble. But Dad and Mom, they were pretty patient with me, through all the mischief.
For my memory on that, you had no memory on that for a reason. That you had been out drinking.
Oh,
sure. Is that fair
Oh,
to
yeah,
say that
well,
that's
look, I didn't
possible?
just drive off in a ditch for no reason.
Well, that's what you're telling the folks.
Well,
And I
I
didn't know, I
figured it
don't
was
remember. It was
implied.
dark, but no,
Yeah,
that's the whole story.
yeah, yeah. That's
You couldn't
yeah.
find it. You couldn't remember where you parked it because you couldn't remember
Well,
anything on that night.
I knew whereabouts. I just didn't know
You knew what
precisely.
town. Yeah, but yeah, I remember mom and dad not being too happy.
No,
But
they
you're
weren't.
right.
But they were pretty
They were
patient.
restrained.
Of
Yeah,
all the, again,
yeah,
times I was mischievous or
yeah,
in trouble, they were pretty good about it. I mean, there was obviously times they weren't real happy with me, but
yeah. So college never was a thought in your mind. I mean, I'm just asking.
I remember Dad really wanting me to go to college, and then I didn't want to go to school. He wanted me to join the service, which I probably should have done one or the other. Now I wished I would have gone to college. I mean, thoroughly regret that, but I wouldn't have. I wouldn't have made it. I just didn't have the mindset for it. I would have partied too much probably, but I regret that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't go to college. I do remember you working in a rather smelly job here in town. Do you remember that?
Well, I worked on Jim Ackerley's hog farm, and I'll
Okay.
tell you what, I loved that
Yeah,
job.
I remember that.
He owned the feed mill in town, so my first part of the day was, excuse me, I would go into the feed mill and load up a truck with the feed and whatever tools and things I needed, and go out on the farm, and I would feed the pigs and do whatever maintenance or whatever I needed to do. And then the second half of the day, after lunch, I would come into town and load up a big auger truck and go out and deliver feed to the Amish. And I liked that. I really enjoyed that, working with the Amish. They were just great people. Jim was a great guy, him and his wife. Uh, June, I believe, is her name.
Yeah, yeah.
And those two kids, they had two sons. And I think they grew up to be really successful men, but boy, they were meaner than hell.
Well, they were little,
As little
they were
kids,
little guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they're good guys.
Yeah.
So, for those of you who don't know, Mark, somehow from there, and we'll get into it, had a quite successful career in radio and at different locations. But where did that bug hit you? Where did the radio bug hit you? And you said, you know what? That might be what I want to do.
Well, it's funny. I've been out of radio for a long time now, but people used to say, how'd you get in radio? And I'd say, well, I started on a hog farm. Because what happened was,
As everybody does.
yeah, of course, that's where you begin.
Yeah.
But, when I would drive out to the hog farms out on Bloomfield Road as you're heading out to where Alan Crane's farm
Yeah,
was,
farm used to be.
out near there. I had a truck radio, and I was always listening to, I think, WBDC in Huntingburg. And Mike Engelman worked there.
Yeah.
And, of course, I knew Mike. He was a grade behind me in school. And, I'd see him around town, and I thought that was pretty cool. And I'd ask him, a little about it. What's that like? And how'd you get into that? And so at that time, you had to get an FCC license. And so I remember, with his encouragement, Mike's encouragement, he encouraged me to order the material from the FCC, which I did. Studied it, wasn't much to it, and I actually went to Indianapolis and took a test and got a license. And then I stayed out on the hog farm. I didn't do much. And again, if my memory's correct, it's been a long time ago. I think I either saw Mike or he may have even come out to the hog farm and said, we have a part-time or a weekend position available. And so I went down there to the radio station, and you ripped off the wire copy off the AP machine.
Oh, yeah.
And you read into a microphone into a reel-to-reel machine.
Yeah.
And if you could read, I think you got the job. And
you still got it.
I mastered reading at that time.
Yeah.
So I got the job and I worked there for a couple of years. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember one story. You lived, did you not? Did you not live above the radio station or the same building?
No, it was a pizza place and bar at night, and it had little apartments right above it.
Right.
And I lived right up there, right on the street. If you're driving right through downtown Huntingburg.
Yeah, 4th Street there, Mark. You'd love it. I mean, it's turned into a very nice historic antique farmers market.
Yeah.
They've done a lot with that city, but yeah, the building's still there.
Yeah, I just lived, the street. I had a window facing right down onto the street. It was a crappy little apartment, but I enjoyed it.
But did you not one time, maybe you were on the morning shift or what have you, and you went to bed and you woke up, you thought it was time to go to work. You went to work, you thought it was a 6 o'clock shift and it was only midnight or something like that. You don't remember that?
I don't remember that, but that's very possible.
Yeah, it's funny the things I remember about you that you don't.
Well, maybe I've suppressed a few things.
But that's how I remember.
Yeah.
And this would have been years ago that you told me that story, of course, that you woke up, oh my gosh, I'm late for work, and you went down and you're supposed to be there at 6, for the morning shift, and the guy said, it's only midnight. what are you doing here? And,
I don't remember that, but
I
I'm
can make
sure it
up more
happened.
stories if you'd like.
Yeah, I'm sure.
The interesting to well, interesting to me, maybe not you, but when we were talking about this last night, you weren't aware that it was about the same time that actually out of high school, I was always interested in radio, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
As you
Well,
know.
you were always as a little kid.
Yeah, yeah,
I think you got a tape recorder
I
for
did.
Christmas once,
Yeah,
and you were broadcasting games
yeah,
into it. That's another memory. I don't know if you remember this when we were little kids. It was just the four of us, me and you and Kevin and Randy. Um, had that little brown transistor radio. We
oh, yeah,
always listened to the St. Louis
yeah,
Cardinal games, and we'd sit around the kitchen table, and sometimes Mom would make popcorn and Kool-Aid, I think, and we'd keep score.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, I
But
had
I
a
mean, you were a
scorebook.
little more
Yeah. Oh, yes.
interested in all that.
You had the scorebook. You went
Yeah.
there. You talk about geeks. I mean, I remember Kevin and I. We would go up to the Dog and Suds and take our radio up there and listen. It's Friday night. What are you
Sure.
going to do? You take your
Yeah.
radio up there and listen to it.
Everybody else is going on dates.
Yeah.
You guys are listening to the Cardinals.
The other thing that I did on Friday nights, again, whatever you want to think, but I remember riding around. You talk about that tape recorder. I had a tape recorder, and I remember Rick Colvin in particular. I'd ride around with him, and we would do player interviews, in the recorder. I remember it was the 1980s, early 1980s, or whatever it was, and we would do those interviews and play them back. And of course, they were terrible, but that's what we would do on a Friday night where you guys were out partying,
Yeah.
and look what it got us. But anyway, so as far as the radio is concerned, what I remember is right out of high school, I was going into my freshman year at Indiana State, WAMW down at Washington.
Mhm.
They were a sun up to sundown station, and they needed somebody to work it. And I would come back on Saturdays and work it. And it just so happened that Mark went through all this trouble and had to go to Indianapolis to get that FCC radio license. Well, right after he got it, they stopped doing that. They said, why do we even do that?
Yeah.
So I didn't have to do that. So I actually got on the air, in my memory, it was either one day right before or one day right after, but that's how close our broadcast career started. He was at Huntingburg, I was at Washington, and within 24 hours, we were on the air from each other.
I didn't
Yeah.
know that till you brought that up. And speaking of WAMW, you remember Doc Cable?
Oh, yeah.
He was the guy that
Yeah.
when it snowed in the wintertime, you always tuned into the radio to see if the school was going to be closed.
Yeah.
Well, that was Paul Bruner's stepdad.
Yes,
A lot of
that's
you
right.
remember Paul Bruner, a great ball player at Goody in the 70s. And Paul and I were good friends. And so we would go down there and visit Doc and Paul's mom. And I was always, I was on there in Huntingburg, I think, at the time. But I was, would pick his brain because to me, he was kind of a legend. But he always discouraged me. He said, "Don't do it. Don't get into radio. You never make any money." And but if you like doing it, you just like doing it. So
Yeah. And Doc, maybe you know, maybe you don't, Mark, but I think he died in the broadcast
I
chair.
did know that,
Had a
yeah.
heart attack.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was a legend around here. Doc Cable,
Yeah.
years ago down there. I worked with Pete Medina. You remember
Yeah, I remember
Pete?
Pete,
Pete was
yeah.
on the FM side. Pete had a
Yeah.
big booming voice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pete was a lot of fun to work
Yeah.
with. Pete was. Um,
So
so
where did you go from there, from WAMW?
well, I was in college, so what I did, I went to a couple of stations there in Terre Haute. WAAC was an AM station, and so I worked there for a little while and actually did the Indiana State University Sycamore baseball games.
Okay,
They
well,
were
that makes
really
perfect
good,
sense, yeah.
really good back then.
Yeah.
And then WPFR, which was the big FM rocking
remember
station
that,
up there, that was the one that all the college students would listen
Yeah.
to. Well, they bought us. So then we were in the same building. Actually, the Oak Ridge Boys bought the station, and so they had WPFR and WAAC. And I've told the story before as well, but they would come in occasionally, and I say probably twice the time I was there, and talk to everybody. And they loaded us up on a bus one time and took us down to Dallas for a major concert, and it was the Commodores, the Oak Ridge Boys, Lee Greenwood.
Wow.
And what I remember about that, Mark, is afterwards they allowed us to go to the after party. It was in a hotel, and the cast of Dallas was there. Remember Charlene Tilton?
Wow.
You remember
Yeah,
Charlene
she
Tilton?
married Johnny Lee.
Yeah, she did. Yeah.
Briefly.
Looking for love. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Charlene Tilton was there, and after that, I couldn't remember anybody. No, Ken Kercheval, who played the mean guy on it,
Yeah.
who's from Linton, Indiana, I think, or somewhere over there. Goober, Jim Lindsay was there.
Oh, Goober.
Goober
yeah.
was
Yeah.
there. I mean, it was just an amazing. And you know what? We didn't even stay all night. We got back on the bus and came back up to Terre Haute. But they were great. I wish In fact, I'm sure I still have somewhere when Lynn and I got married, they had sent a very nice um, paper memo, I guess, congratulating us on our wedding, and I wish that I was able to stay in contact in some way
Yeah.
because they're still performing
Yeah.
and great, but um, that was a real
Yeah.
highlight for me.
Do you have much memorabilia from when you were in the radio business?
I've got, and I really, you remember, of course, we did it was just cassettes, but you'd always do air checks.
Yeah, yeah,
So I don't know where they are, Mark, but I used to do air checks, for different
yeah.
stations. And I've got an interview somewhere of Larry Bird the year that he won his first Most Valuable Player. And what I remember about that is um, Tony Clark was the best friend of Larry Bird. And he was the general manager of our radio station there in Terre Haute. And Larry Bird wouldn't do interviews with anybody in
Right.
Terre Haute except for Bob Forbes, who was the broadcaster at Channel
Yeah.
10 and did the ball games. But he allowed me to do an interview with him. I think it was at a golf outing. And as you can imagine, Larry wasn't the greatest interview,
Yeah.
and I wasn't the greatest interviewer, but it's something that I'd treasured
Sure.
for a long time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have one thing from 25 years, and I mean tapes, uh, you know, pictures. I don't know why. I just never kept them. I don't know where they all went, but I don't have.
Speaking of people that I just name dropped, I guess, if you will, you in your time have come across, because of what you do, a lot of famous people. Who stands out, people that you either interviewed or met that people might know as being famous?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of interviews that stand out. I know one time the program director at our radio station called me early in the morning and woke me up and said, "Do you want to do an interview with Kenny Rogers?"
Mm.
And I said, "Yeah, sure." He was doing a video out in Tucson back when they did music videos. And so I just woke up, threw on some clothes, and went out. Looking back on it, I can remember now. He must have thought, "What a awful interview this was," because it probably was. But he was really, really gracious and really nice. Um, I remember bringing on George Strait when he first came up at a concert in El Paso, Texas.
And when he says bringing on, I assume you mean introducing.
Yeah,
him because
you never really met George. George doesn't really.
Is that right?
He doesn't do interviews.
Yeah, I don't know George like you do.
No, I don't know.
By the way, Mark, George Strait, the biggest George Strait fan in history, certainly in Loogootee. Jennifer Blackwell Tedrow would be watching, and
well, he's the king.
He's the king. Yeah.
Another really interesting, what I thought was interview. I think they were having the Academy of Country Music Awards or something like that in Nashville. Excuse me, one time, and a group of disc jockeys from around the country were invited to come there, and we went into I think it was a really large recording studio, and they had tables set up like this, not quite this big, but there were like 10 of them around the room, and there was entertainer after entertainer would just stop at each table, and you would do an interview, and there was Brad Paisley and Mindy McCready and Leanne Womack, and I just can't remember all of it, but I mean, they just kept filing through, so that was a couple of things that I'll cherish those memories.
I was trying to think. I thought you had a story. Barbara Mandrell. Had you met Barbara Mandrell?
I don't think
okay,
so.
Then it wasn't. It was the one who was married to Keith Whitley.
Oh, Lori Morgan.
Lori Morgan.
Yes.
Yeah.
One time she was performing at a big club in Tucson, and before the show, I forget how it came to be, but her manager or somebody came back in the club and said, Barbara or Lori would like to have you come out on the bus. And so it was Lori and her sister were on the bus. And we sat down and we were talking just briefly. And she goes, "Would you like a beer or a shot of tequila?" And I said, "Yes."
Are you hitting on me?
I said, "Yes." And she goes, "Which one?" I said, "I'll have a beer and a shot of tequila." But we had a really nice talk. And, then she came out and performed and was really, really good.
Yeah.
She was terrific.
Yeah. Another one that I remember, because I had very few relative to what Mark, but you'll know the name. Rue McClanahan.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Blanche Devereaux on the Golden Girls. She was in Terre Haute, and she was, I think, doing a summer play and was promoting it. And she came into the radio station. And it's just like Blanche Devereaux. She just seemed nervous. She's nice, but just seemed nervous, And I really honestly can't recall if I interviewed her or somebody else did. I just remember meeting her there. But that's about, Herschel Walker. I did go down and get to interview Herschel Walker.
Yeah.
But that's, and then Mark Bateman, and some of the people around
Look
here.
where you've come.
Yeah, look where I've come. I'm gone now. So radio in Huntingburg. From Huntingburg, you go to the Louisville area.
Yeah, again, Paul Bruner was a good friend of mine, and he lived down in New Albany, Indiana, which is right across the river from Louisville. And we were talking one day, and I'd been in Huntingburg for a couple of years, and I think I said something like, I guess if I'm going to do this, I probably can't do it here for the rest of my life, or I guess I could. But he said, well, you come down and live with me and work over in Louisville.
Yeah.
And I said, really? And he said, yeah. So I did. I moved down there. But what was really cool about that was in that area, Jim and Jack Trout,
Yeah.
Paul, Brian and Diana Canada, and a couple other friends, Steve Collins and Chris Koner. We all lived in real close proximity. I'm going to tell you a really funny story about Paul. Rest in peace, Paul. Now that he's gone, and enough time has eclipsed. We had a neighbor. His name was Chris Koner, and Chris was a lovely guy, but boy was he nuts. But we worked out a deal with him where if we mowed his lawn, he'd let us use his mower to mow our lawn. And we lived right across the street from one another. And one day I came home, and Paul was out mowing Chris's lawn, and Paul he really sweated a lot. And he was out there, and I said, Paul, why are you mowing Chris's yard in your underwear? And he had gone to a store earlier and thought he bought like Bermuda shorts, and he bought boxer underwear, and he was just sweating right through them. And I mean, he as soon as he looked down, he ran across the street, but he'd already been out there for 30 minutes mowing the grass.
And you had to bring it to his attention.
Well, I just thought,
somebody did.
Yes, being a good friend.
Yeah. That must have been interesting. Like you said, the Trouts, Canada, Paul Bruner. Think about that right now. You're the only one of that group that was not a legend in basketball. What do you think about that?
Well, you didn't have to bring it up. Well, but we did play some good basketball leagues. I mean, we were pretty good. Well, they were really good. But I happened to be, again, a mediocre player and a very good group of guys. But that was really fun. I was there for a couple of years, I think it was, and really forged great friendships with those guys.
Yeah, I mean that's the cool thing. You're such great friends today.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, but yeah, I was lucky enough to I got a job at one of those daytime stations over in Louisville, and again, didn't pay any money, but Paul said, pay me whatever you can, whatever.
Oh, Paul was your landlord?
Well, I lived with him.
Oh, you lived with him?
Yeah, but then I got lucky and got a weekend job at what was Wave Radio and TV at the time. Now it's WAVG. But I'll never forget when I first started. I was still only a couple of years into doing radio, and I'm still talk like a guy from Southern Indiana. And I remember going on the air and I said something about WAVG. Well, one of these guys pulled me aside, and he was being very kind. He wasn't being sarcastic, but he said, Mark, you got to enunciate. It's WAVG, and I was just kind of running through it, and I'll never forget that. And it made a big impact on me, But
how were you saying it?
WAVG.
What was that? I didn't understand.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's exactly right. So, but that was a really good opportunity because I got to the point where I was working, filling in for everybody, doing a little sports, reading the news, doing everybody's shift. And finally, after about a year, a guy named Lee Masters, who
big time.
Yeah, he worked at WNBC in New York at one time, but he also helped launch VH1 TV.
Really?
Yeah, he brought Howard Stern to VH1.
Oh, okay.
But he was the operations manager at that time in Louisville, and he called me in his office, and he said, Mark, I don't have a full-time job here for you, but I am part owner of a radio station in El Paso, Texas. Would you like to go and work for me there? And this was on a Friday, and I remember coming home that weekend and telling Mom and Dad that I was going to move. So I told him yes on Monday, left Louisville on Wednesday, and was in El Paso the following Friday. And I had an old Oldsmobile car, and everything I had was in it. I didn't have anything but clothes. That was it, So we ended up going to El Paso, Texas.
Now, where along the lines did you work? You mentioned Howard Stern, so I've got to mention Don Imus, which many of you might know. Certainly people who know radio would know. He kind of, I guess, shock jock, maybe, right?
Oh, probably the first one.
But his brother, Fred Imus, had a show as well.
Well, while I was in El Paso, a guy, I can't remember his name now, but he was a general manager of WNBC in New York, bought the station that I was on in El Paso. And he came to town one time, and we went to lunch or something, and he said, "I'm going to bring in Don Imus's brother Fred, and you and him are going to work together in the mornings in El Paso." And I thought, well, great, that'll be fun. I didn't know Fred. I knew who Don was, of course, but uh, so Fred moves to town, and we hit it off really good. But the problem was we were terrible on the air.
Really?
Well, I had still only been doing radio for 3 years. I'm still feeling my way. Fred was a very funny and interesting guy off the air. We just didn't translate on the air, But the thing of it was, uh, I was kind of put in charge of Fred, and he passed not too long ago. So and we remain great friends. Matter of fact, I got him a job in Tucson, but he was you go to his apartment and it was just a mess, dishes everywhere. When he put on clothes, they didn't match. So the general manager called me in his office one day and he said, "I'm going to put you in charge of Fred. So when we go out and do remote broadcast, it was up to me to pick him up and make sure he got there on time and was dressed appropriately." And you don't want to put me in charge of anybody, but we had a great time. We would get off the air in the mornings and we would go to a Denny's. And we thought we were trying to prepare for the next day's show, and we were hilarious in Denny's. But we thought we were.
Yeah.
But we had fun. I remember Don. Well, the good thing was, Don had a whole production staff in New York, and people that did voice work and everything, and they would send us tapes, funny tapes and stuff. So that part was fun. But he would call on the hotline, and I would pick it up, and he'd say, "Don't say anything, Bateman. Just get me my brother."
Is that right?
Yeah. Oh, he was very gruff,
Yeah.
but he was a really nice guy. He came to El Paso one time, and him and his daughter, and so me and him and his daughter and Fred, I took him to Juarez, and in typical Don Imus fashion, he hated every minute of it. But
well, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's
it was cool, but it was a great experience. But we weren't very good on the air.
Now that we have a big clock in the background, I can sort of do a time check. And this is going to be another long one. We might have to split this one up in two, so watch whatever you want, but we're an hour into it or better, and we're just getting started. So how long were you in El Paso?
5 years.
5 years.
Yeah.
Good memories of El Paso?
Great memories. I spent a lot of it in Juarez, Mexico. That was back before it got really, really dangerous. But you could go right across the border, and there was just a number of shops and bars and restaurants. I spent a lot of time over there at the horse track in Juarez, and I had a great time there.
Where did you? What stop did you do? I think you were a traffic reporter at one time, were you not?
Well, that was on television in Tucson.
In Tucson?
Yeah.
Not up in the air, helicopter, right?
No. In the morning TV stations, they all had a morning show, and part of that was let's take a look at what's going on outside with your traffic, and doing road construction reports and things of that nature. But I'd been in El Paso for a few years, or Tucson, I'm sorry, and a good friend of mine either owned or was the manager of all the traffic people in Tucson, and he said, Channel 13 they need a traffic person. Would you be willing to do that? And
you said, "I drive all the time. I should be good at that."
Well, I mean, I certainly got to know the city streets, but anyway, I was working at that time from 10 to 2 or 10 to 3 on the radio, but I would go to work at 4:30 in the morning till 8 o'clock at the TV station. But what was really cool about that was, they would say, "Okay, now let's take a look at the traffic," and then they'd come to me. But as time went on, if they had somebody of a country music nature or a country music story, they threw that to me. And then I started getting to do, if they had a sports figure that came in, I was able to, I would do the interview with that person. So I kind of was able to expand that a little bit. So that was really enjoyable.
So you did that, but you also did at some stop, and I'm assuming it could have been any place because they all have horse racing venues, Louisville, El Paso, and Tucson. But you did reports on TV for or some show for a horse track.
Yeah,
right?
that was in El Paso. But I'll tell you, I don't think nobody watched it except the jockeys and the trainers and people affiliated. What we would do is we would, or whoever the company was that hired me, I forget what it was now, but it was on like cable TV, and that's back when cable was kind of just new.
Yeah.
But we would rerun the races and then give the payoffs, and then for like the first 30 minutes, and the next 30 minutes we would just do interviews of jockeys, trainers, or horse owners, or people affiliated with the track. Yeah.
But you never did do the play-by-play of the horses.
No, no, that would be tough. I mean,
Yeah, that would
that's
be
a real
tough.
skill.
Yeah, you got to
Yeah,
be able to see.
yeah,
You can't be colorblind.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, Today, those of you who know WWBL, the Bullet, is still real country. Yeah,
Yeah, real country.
real country. Well, Mark was. I know you weren't on the original real country team, but
Yeah, I
shortly.
was.
Were you really?
Yeah.
Because I remember you talking about some people that. So this is a network affiliated that goes out to, I don't know. Do you remember how many stations you guys had at the
When I
time?
left, 130.
And you were based out of where?
Phoenix.
Okay, Phoenix, Arizona. But the great thing about that was Mark was living in Phoenix area, and the Bullet was, I don't know if it was called the Bullet then, but it was real country. So we could listen to Mark's shift here in Loogootee, Indiana, and Mom and Dad loved it. And I remember seeing a billboard of Mark in toward Mitchell, and it had real country.
We did
and-
have an affiliate in
yeah,
Mitchell.
in Mitchell.
Yeah.
But that had to have been an interesting gig, I guess.
Well, I'll tell you what was most interesting about it was what happened was I'd been in Tucson for a couple of years, and our program director came to me and he said, Mark, I don't know if you know this or not, but Buck Owens, who owned KNIX and all kinds of media,
Buck Owens.
he along with ABC Radio, were partnering to put together a network of traditional country music. I mean, they played George Strait, and Alan Jackson, and Clint Black, and those people, but they wanted to keep it traditional. We also played Hank Snow, Kitty Wells, a lot of the really older country music. And he said they're putting together this network, and they have one shift available. It's an overnight shift, and I think you ought to send a tape down. And I said, I don't think I want to work overnights. And he said, well, I think this would be a pretty good opportunity. So I sent a tape down, and they called me for an interview. And I think partly because of the proximity of Tucson and Phoenix, we were just close. And so they did hire me, and we were on 4 stations at the time.
4 stations.
Yeah, but
one of them was here.
no, not at that time.
Okay.
Every week we would, it seemed like we, go in and record new liners for different call letters for different stations that would come on board.
Okay.
But the really cool thing about that was, first of all, it was the most state-of-the-art studios. KNIX, they did everything first class, everything. They had a workout facility with a full gym, sauna, half-court basketball. They had a full-time trainer. And all this was free. It was just across the parking lot. So I would get done with my shift and walk across it, and I'd get off at 5 in the morning, and I'd go over and turn up the music and work out. It was just, and they were such wonderful people. But Michael Owens was Buck's son. He was the general manager. Buddy Owens, who went by the name of Buddy Allen, he was on Hee Haw a lot, had a few hit records. He was our music director, and Buddy was a great guy. He was about 6'3", and a pretty good basketball player, so he played with us all the time. But I think part of his job was to entertain the entertainers that came to town, and they were coming in all the time. Any day you could see a limousine pull up, and you didn't know who was going to walk out. Mainly because of Buck's affiliation. Everybody knew and loved Buck Owens. Now he didn't live in Phoenix; he lived in Bakersfield, but he was there a lot.
So you met Buck Owens?
Oh yeah, I literally first time bumped into him. I was coming around the corner, and he was coming the other way, and we literally bumped into each other. And what was funny is I didn't know what to say. Did I call him Buck?
Yeah.
Or Mr. Owens?
I can see that. Sorry, Buck. Yeah, I wouldn't go. Yeah.
But they were just a first-class operation, and I really enjoyed working with those guys and at that facility. But like you said, every week or 2 weeks, you'd have to go in and they give you a set of call letters, and like you're listening to WBDW or whatever.
WWBL. I'm not sure that's what it was here.
Man. And and now the weather on the Bullet, and things like that. And so we eventually, after 5 years, I was there for 5 years. We had about 130 stations around the country, and I think there was 4 in Indiana and Louisville. So
yeah, a little story, and I think I relayed this to you. I'm pretty sure I did, but my new boss now, sort of, I'm not really working, but for WRZR is Dwayne Shake Broadcasting. Well, Dwayne grew up in Washington, as a lot of you know, and grew up listening to real country, and he heard Mark on there, and he thought he'd just walk down to the radio station in Washington and meet Mark. And he was disappointed that Mark really wasn't there in Washington. So, Dwayne, I hope that's the story that you relate upon to me, but that's pretty cool.
Well, one time I remember, when I was at the Real Country Network, I started doing a 2-minute sports report when I'd get off the air, I'd compile the sports from that night,
Mm-hmm.
and you would do 1 minute, and everything had to be exact. I mean, 60 seconds on the. And I would do 1 minute, and I would say, "You're listening to the Real Country Network," and then I would pause and do the second, because some affiliates could either not do it, they could run the full 2 minutes, or they could run 1 minute. So, when I was done, I would feed it down to the affiliates, and then they would run it whenever they wanted to. Some of them ran it at noon, some of them whenever. Well, one time in Bangor, Maine, a guy that I knew in El Paso had moved there through the military. He went down to the radio station, thought I was in Bangor, Maine,
Mm-hmm.
and they had to explain that he's.
Yeah, he didn't have a gun or anything, did he?
No.
That could happen too.
It could happen.
Yeah, yeah. So you did that for how long?
5 years.
5 years, and then back to Tucson.
Well, what happened was there was a big country festival. Maybe they have it in Wisconsin as well. It's called a Country Thunder. Maybe you've heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
So every year we would go out to that, and like I said, they always did things pretty first class. So our promotion staff would build a really nice booth where we would do interviews and just give out little keychains and things like that. So one time the promotions manager from the radio station in Tucson where I'd left came over and wanted to kind of tour our area. And just as an aside, she just said, "Yeah, our afternoon guy's leaving us." And I just, as a offhanded remark, I just said, I always thought if afternoons became available, I wouldn't mind moving back to Tucson. Well, that Monday, I got a call from the station owner's daughter, who I'd known. She worked at the station, and she said, "I heard you're interested in coming back." And I said, "Well, I do recall making that remark." And so it turned out they set up an interview, and the operations manager and I met, and we worked out a deal, and I came back and was there for another 11 years.
What year would that have been?
95.
95. All right. So you worked there for 11 years. Then do you get out of radio?
Yes. What happened was I was really enjoying it. And you'll know this, when you first get into radio, they always tell you the first thing is be yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's hard to do. I mean, people don't realize when you put a microphone or a TV camera in front of somebody, their tendency is to want to be funny, be clever, be something. But you have to settle in and try and be yourself. And it took me kind of a long time to kind of figure that out. But when I got back into Tucson, things started to kind of click, and it seemed like things were going pretty good. But then we had a good owner of the radio station. But then these big corporations came in and started buying us. We were sold twice,
Mm-hmm.
and we weren't even programming our own music. It was done at some headquarters somewhere in another state. It got to be where it wasn't as fun or as interesting anymore, and I was a little frustrated, I think. And so one time, Kim and I were actually in Louisville, Kentucky, at a wedding. Brian Canada and Diana's daughter, Brianna, was getting married. And we were leaving, and we were in the airport in Louisville, and I picked up a newspaper, and there was an article in there about this guy franchising this new business he started. Mm-hmm. It happened to be Flicko's Video Service, where they transferred old film and audio and video to digital. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And I'd been thinking of doing something different anyway. And so I called him from the airport. There was a number in the paper for potential franchisees, and we agreed to talk later when I got back. And long story short, we just we thought we'd do it, and we ended up buying the franchise, and we had it for 11 years.
Yeah. So that means you actually went to a payphone, put money in it, and made the phone call at the airport. That's the only way you could have done it.
That might have been.
Maybe. Yeah.
Or else maybe a courtesy phone or something. I don't remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's not as good a story, but okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Flicko's, enjoy it? I mean, you were kind of your own owner.
But it got to be where you couldn't go on vacation.
Yeah.
And
you watched all these vacations, right?
Yeah, right. People bring their I saw everybody's Christmas and everything. But for example, one time Kim and I were in San Diego, and we didn't do any filming, but we contracted people out to do it, weddings and things like that. And before we left, we had a wedding that was being filmed, and we dotted all of our I's and crossed our T's. But I got a phone call in San Diego that said the videographer didn't show up. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, we had a couple people we worked with, and I was able to get somebody over there. But it got to the point where it was 24/7, and I was getting older, and it was time to. So we eventually decided to sell it, and luckily only one person was interested, but they bought it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow! Okay.
Yeah.
So after radio, a casino comes calling. Right? I mean, there's a couple of casinos out there. Which, by the way, Mom and Dad, when they went out to Tucson, Mom loved to go to casinos.
Yeah, she did.
I mean, loved to go to casinos, and Dad would just watch and enjoy her losing all that money. But she would go to one in particular, and so
Well, the one I worked at.
the one you worked
Yeah,
at, yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
how'd you get that story? How'd you get that
Well,
job?
I hadn't done much for about a year, and my wife Kim, whom I married in Montgomery
Oh, yeah.
in 2006, I believe it was. Um,
You better know it.
I know
Mike.
it. I know.
We'll edit
Put
that out.
myself on the spot right there, didn't I? But anyway, she works from home. She's got a little office set up, and I was just getting on her nerves, and she said, you gotta do something. And so one day, I'm over at my neighbor's, Fernando, drinking beer with him probably, and he was telling me they were having a job fair at the Phoenix, and the one thing that was really appealing was the benefits were really, the healthcare benefits and other things were really attractive. And he said, you should go down there and, apply. And I said, well, okay. So I went down there and they had a job in the warehouse. And so I applied and, I got the job. And, I enjoyed it. It was pretty nice job in the warehouse. When people wanted food and things, you'd get it and take it to them and all that. But
Yeah, it doesn't sound that fun. But go ahead.
well, I mean, it was not some nice people I worked with, and it wasn't too taxing on my mind. That's for sure. But after you're at a casino or this casino for a period of 6 months, you're allowed to apply for other positions.
Yeah.
And so after 6 months, I just went down the hallway to the marketing department, and I had a little resume on a thumb drive and said, "Hey, if would you take a look at this? If anything comes up, if I'm qualified, would you let me know?" And they said, "Well, we just lost our promotions coordinator," and I said, well, I didn't have any idea, but okay. So next week they said, yeah, why don't you apply? And so I did, and they gave me the job, and I was there for 4 years.
Which entailed what?
Well, mainly it entailed we would have these meetings to try and find promotions, trying to find ways to bring as many people as we could into the casino, but just as importantly, the big players. So, you wanted to try and appeal to people that spend a lot of money, but you also wanted to just bring in people who were coming in on a Saturday night or had relatives in town. But we had a kind of a running joke. On Mondays, we'd have these meetings, and we'd be sitting around a table like this. And okay, anybody got any ideas? How can we get people in the casino? Open the doors, which is true. If you open the doors,
People will come.
Yeah. But we would plan these different types of promotions, give away cars and money, and then we'd go out and execute them. So that was kind of fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned Kim. So Mark, now that I think about it, really wasn't later in life, but at the time, it seemed like you got married later in life.
I was 50.
I was later in life. All right. So how'd you meet Kim?
Well,
she's not from Indiana.
No, she's from Illinois originally.
Yeah, Midwest.
But we've both been in Tucson for many, many years, although I didn't know her. But there was a time where there was it's a legendary country music bar in Tucson called the Maverick. It's been there for decades. And I knew the guy that owned it real well, and he and I were pretty good friends. And he used to give me $100 to come out there every Friday. Now, he would say, would you just when the band would take a break, get up on stage and do a little trivia or give away something? And I'd say, sure. Of course, he'd get most of his $100 back because I had to buy my own drinks. But one time I saw Kim in there, and I just thought she was very, very attractive. And so I finally got up the nerve to ask her if she wanted to go out on a date. And unbelievably, she agreed.
Yeah, it's hard to believe. Yeah.
Yeah.
So 2006,
Yeah.
you get married, as you said, down at the Gostoff in Montgomery.
Yeah, that was a great area.
It was beautiful, and we have it happened to be the night of the alumni banquet.
That's right.
Which I'm emceeing, and recognized Mark and Kim that they have now been married for 6 hours or so, and your response was?
And they thought it would never last.
And they thought it would never last, and it has now for
it has, yeah.
16 years.
Yeah, she's been a great partner. She's really intelligent, and I needed somebody with
Really intelligent.
with that asset.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
We've been able to do some business ventures together, and mainly through her knowledge and work ethic, and it's been a great partnership. Yeah.
A place that you really enjoyed going to. I don't know if you still go there or not. Rocky Point.
Yeah, Rocky Point. It's actually called the name of it is Puerto Penasco, but Gringos call it Rocky Point.
Are we Gringos?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's a 4-hour drive from my front door to the Gulf of California in Mexico.
Okay.
and and it's a lot. Everybody from Southern Arizona, that's where you go for long weekends or vacations. It's just it used to be when I started going there, Thanksgiving Day of 1990. Um, it was a sleepy little fishing village with some cheap hotels along the beach. Well, now there's high-rise resorts and condos, but it's still you can get off of that beach and go into town, and they have a fish market where you can go in and buy shrimp. Right, they've just
Yeah.
come off the boat.
I don't know if we mentioned, but Mark lives in Tucson,
Yeah, yeah.
Arizona. But again, just kind of off the top of my head, it seems like one of those stories that I thought, well, Mark's always right there, good or bad. But were you not traveling and maybe in Mexico you might have ran across a dead body?
No, well,
Okay.
no. What happened was, not well.
Am I making
Actually,
things up
no.
again?
You're
Okay.
almost right.
All right.
What happened was, I was coming back from Rocky Point one time, and when you cross back over the border, you get to an area where there's just a long stretch of straight highway in southwestern Arizona, I guess it is. And I was driving along there, and I see up ahead there's a person on the road, standing. And as I get closer, it's a young girl, and she's kind of trying to wave me down or whatever. Well, I didn't want to stop because there's a lot of illegal immigrants, and you never know when it's a trap or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I went by. I mean, I slowed down and I went by, but I could see my rearview mirror. She was in distress. So I backed up and, rolled down the window. And she spoke in Spanish only, and I didn't understand it. And she didn't understand me. But I knew there was a small rural convenience store not too far up. And so I agreed to take her to there where we could call Border Patrol. And, I had some water bottle, excuse me, and so I gave her a bottle of water. She was crying and she was talking, and I didn't understand what she was saying. So I drop her off at the convenience store. We call the Border Patrol, and then I leave. So the next day I'm thinking about it and thinking about it. So I actually called the Border Patrol and said, there's a scenario, and I'm the guy that picked her up, and I'm just curious, what was the scenario and what happened? And she said that a group of what they call them coyotes, the kind of the ringleader, will be bringing people over the border, and they march through the desert to bring them into the United States, and they get a ride, hopefully, to go wherever they want. And her brother got sick and couldn't go anymore. And these guys that do this are pretty ruthless. They just left him. She wouldn't leave her brother, obviously, and he couldn't go anymore. And he was out there in the desert, and she came to the road to try and find help. And he did pass away.
Wow.
And I said, well, what's going to happen to her? And they said, we're going to put her on a bus and take her back to wherever she came from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Different life.
Oh, it is. And there's a big controversy out there. Every summer they find dozens of bodies of people that think they can get across, and they don't bring enough water. And there's a humanitarian group that goes out into the desert, and they fill barrels of water, or they leave big plastic things of water. And there's also another group that goes out and empties them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They don't think they should be coming across. And whatever your feeling is on it, people just think they're trying to save lives.
Yeah. But I was just thinking the contrast of Tucson and Loogootee. So in my front yard every day, I've got squirrels and rabbits and green grass. And in your yard?
Well, you have to do landscaping. We just landscape the yard, and we've got pavers, synthetic grass, and rock, and cactus.
And maybe an occasional rattlesnake.
Oh yeah,
maybe
yeah,
an occasional
we get rattlesnakes.
bobcat or
Bobcats. Actually, they just had a mountain lion sighting in our area, and recently, because we have a monsoon season every year where we get a lot of rain for about 6 weeks, or we hope we do. But before that, we're in a big drought out there, and we hadn't had rain for a while. And they actually had a bear come down the mountain and right into our side of town, and they tranquilized it and moved it into a remote area. But you get a lot of interesting wildlife. Javelina, those things are crazy. They look like a pig, but they're not. But there's some interesting wildlife out there.
Yeah.
Scorpions.
So when we think about, just popped in my head, Mark, I think a family that we probably should mention, and that's the Bloodsouls. Richard and David, and I think Brenda, right?
Brenda and Mike.
Brenda and Mike, yep. And Billy and Bonnie.
Yeah.
Or the mom and dad, and we spent a lot of time with them. In fact, there was a partnership, as I remember, that our family, along with their family or the parents, owned the Southside Bar.
Well, I don't think our mom and dad had any ownership in
Okay.
it. I think Mom and Dad worked there, and I think Bill and Bonnie owned it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I got that wrong. But we spent a lot of time there on Sunday mornings
Oh yeah,
when
yeah.
they were cleaning up, and we just went for the fun of it, and they would grill the hamburgers and what have you. And
Well,
but
not only
that was a very fun part
well,
of my
not
day.
only that though. On Sundays, we would go in to help clean up after Saturday night, and you'd find coins all over the floor.
Yeah, that's right. Or in the booths.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the rule was, I think Dad and Mom, the rule for us was, if you found coins, you could keep it, but if you found like a wallet or dollar bills or something,
Yeah, probably not a good idea.
yeah, you had to turn it back in or something.
Yeah, I remember they had bands there.
Oh, yeah.
Rusty and the White Owls,
Yeah, I
I think, or
remember
something like that. But I remember Richard in particular, because even back then, yeah, Richard wasn't my best friend. He was older. He was more Kevin's best
Right,
friend
right,
at the
right.
time. But if you remember, they lived on that big house right across from the old high school gymnasium, right on the highway. Well, Richard and I were close enough. Where one night, hey, why don't you stay all night? So I stayed all night with him. I was probably 10. Probably lived up in the trailer, right?
Right.
And if you think about where he lives, traffic would go by all night long in these big semis.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I got to the point where in the middle of the night, I said, I just walked back home to the trailer.
Hitchhiked home?
No, I didn't hitchhike. I just walked back home to the trailer. But it's funny, some of the things you remember.
Yeah.
And Richard would never, he'd probably first of all say, why in the world were you staying all night with
Yeah.
me? But I remember they had a set of drums. I don't know who did the drums there, but just in a big room, they had a set of drums. And yeah, it's just funny the things you remember.
Well, Dave was really a close friend. I mean, we were in the same class.
Right.
And I think we were, we were teenagers, but neither one of us had our driver's license. But somehow, it was Mike's car. Mike had a little souped up car, but they'd moved out to Whitfield by that time, which is where Dave lives now. And they allowed Dave to drive his car, or that car. And so we would go out on Whitfield back roads, and he would, it was a 4 or 5 speed shift or whatever. And just, really, drive fast out on those roads out there. We weren't, neither one of us had driver's license,
Golly. Probably didn't get caught either, did you?
No, I don't think we ever did. No.
Yeah. We said in some form or fashion we'd have to talk about our siblings at some point or another. But I don't know. What do you want to talk about?
Ran out of time.
Yeah. God, wow. Take a break? No, and I'll start. We're not going to go through them one by one, but I do want to mention, and I put this on Facebook because it's so important. Sammy, our sister. So in the month of August is her birthday, August 11th. And we typically celebrate the entire month of her birthday. I think that's more of her guideline than ours, but we comply the entire month.
It was
of
her
August
idea.
in some form or fashion. Well, this year she decided to turn the switch a little bit, and starting from the very first day, and it's not just family, as I found out, friends, coworkers, but she did something nice, whether it's prepare a meal or whatever it was, every single day of the month. And as I said on Facebook, we'd be at the city park for National Eat Outside Day on a Wednesday night.
Yeah.
National Oyster Day, who knew? She would bring treats to all of our dogs because it was National Dog Day. Gosh, every day is something, if you look on there. And she found something that was appropriate. But the most appropriate was National Root Beer Float Day. We went out to the cemetery, all of us, and had balloons and had root beer floats and a toast to Mom, and released balloons.
Oh, nice.
But I don't think people understand what Sammy actually did every day of the month. Who does that? And the first day of the month, by the way, her oven blew out when she was cooking for something. So she didn't have her oven, so she'd go to other people's home and bake stuff. but that's, and the response we got on Facebook, because people love Sammy so much in the area, is just overwhelming. And she's not on Facebook, so she didn't see it. But I want to start with that. And then you tell me everything good that Randy's done. Yeah, go on.
Well, you caught me off guard there.
Okay, let's go to Chris.
No, I will tell you. I will tell you. Randy actually lived in Tucson for about 15 years.
Yeah, you're probably actually closer to Randy because
we
he's
certainly
lived out
became
there.
close.
Yeah.
We had a great time. Randy, he grew up here in Loogootee, and whenever he moved out there, we had an opportunity to see another part of the country, and had a great time. Boy, I'll tell you what though, if you ask Randy for a favor or to do a job for you, you're going to get 100%.
Yeah.
He'll do.
He's a hard worker. He'll work.
Yeah.
And Randy's the one who just lost his wife, Donna, just in the last couple of months. So.
And he stepped up to the plate. That would be tough for anyone. but you know, you got to take care of
Oh, he's remarkable.
that
Yeah.
person. He did.
But Randy's a little bit different in the fact that he doesn't want to get out. He's not real social. He doesn't want to start a conversation. But as you said, what a heart of gold, Randy.
Yeah.
And I didn't mean to go through every one of them and talk about the goods and the bads. It's just that people will tell us, hey, you got an amazing family, and we know that, right?
Well, and you know, you do go down. Kevin, I've said this before. If more people were like Kevin, this would be a better world because he's as honest as the day is long. He lives his life on his terms,
Yeah.
and that's hard to do.
Yeah.
You know, because
including work, which he works from home, has for years.
And then you know, I said, Chris, have you ever seen him when he didn't have a smile on his face?
Who, Chris? Yeah, Chris.
He's just the happiest-go-lucky guy you'll ever see.
Yeah.
And of course, you've done a lot for this community.
Yeah.
You do a lot. So.
Yeah, but no, Chris is probably one of my best friends. If we're going to do something, it's hey Chris, do you want to do this or that? And of course his family. By the way, as we tape this, it's Thursday. His daughter Emily is getting married on Saturday, and God bless you, Emily. We love you and Nate, and we just adore all of the family. And so did we mention everybody?
No, I do want to say something. Dad and I were out walking this morning, and of course you've seen him walking the streets.
Oh yeah.
He's not homeless.
No.
He just walks the streets. But he had an idea today that I thought was terrific, and he said he thinks he's too old to do it now. But he thought it'd be funny to write a little or keep a little journal. My life walking the streets of Loogootee. Because he's always running into somebody. And,
that's a new YouTube series right there. Yeah.
I just thought that's a terrific idea. But
what was it? Brooke Hawkins, Brooke Deerwester, I think it was Brooke. Yeah. Was Helen Nolly, Clay Deerwester's daughter, Brooke. Okay, but anyway, her and Perry were very good friends growing up, and Dad goes to the gym in Loogootee and works out almost every day. And she said, I never thought that I would be telling you this, Perry, but I go to the gym and work out with your dad, 83 years old, and see him there every day. My best friend, and then I work out with your dad. And I dream of the day where I can work out like one day, but I'll get there. But Dad and Mom, I mean, you talk about a rock in Dad.
Oh yeah.
Where do you start?
Well, I touched on it earlier,
and you all know him, so you know where we're going.
Looking back, I realize now, what kind of patience they had, and both Mom and Dad. You don't think of it at the time. At the time, I just thought, why are they on me all the time? Well, looking back, it was obvious why. But
I never asked that question.
They just had so much patience. And one thing we didn't talk about, and I wanted to mention that too. We talked about this a few weeks ago when you broached this subject. We were going to talk about what was our favorite Christmas.
Oh yeah.
And I think if you ask any one of our brothers or sister, they'd all say the same thing.
Yeah.
I don't remember what year it was.
Well, Sam and Chris probably wouldn't remember.
Well, they weren't even around, I don't think, at that time. But one year we woke up and all four of us had bicycles, brand new bicycles.
Yeah. Did you get a chance to watch my grandson Elias do the interview with Dad?
Yes.
Well, Dad talks about that very fondly, and it was his favorite.
Yeah.
That was the question.
Yeah.
And brand new bicycles, and it's not like back then. You didn't just buy new bicycles for kids.
Yeah.
And we had four of them. We had four of them.
I mean, that wasn't even, I didn't think even in the realm of our imagination. Maybe we got a bike and we could all share it or something.
Yeah, maybe got a football or something like that.
But we all four brand new bicycles. That was really something.
But even today at 83 years old, if we need something done because none of us are inclined mechanically or can't fix anything, call Dad. He'll do it, and he does. He gets it done.
And I will say too. I've been gone from Loogootee for 35 years or something. But it's funny. Even in Tucson today, when when I'm coming back, I never say I'm going back to Loogootee. I say I'm going back home. I just this community is everything.
Yeah. Well, that brings up a little story that you and I had the other day. A little bit of confusion. We were talking about Randy, and the family, by the way, is going to Las Vegas, including Dad. And what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. We know that. But to the IU Arizona game, because Mark's a big Arizona fan, we're all IU fans. But anyway, we were discussing that, and you said you were in Arizona, and you said, I'm going to talk to Randy when I get home. And you were telling me you just were getting ready to get in the shower, and you never did understand this. And I said, but Mark, you're going to call him when you get home. You're already home. And I didn't register what you meant until after the conversation. He meant when he comes home this week.
Right.
That's what home is, right?
Yeah. Loogootie's, I mean, I don't know if people here, take it for granted or if people realize this is a really cool community.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, with the sports in particular, but just the people. Dad and I were talking earlier today. Over the course of the years, what a cast of characters. Up and down the decades in Loogootee, and this kind of thing that you're doing really highlights people. And I think I watch them. I can't wait for them to come out. I make sure I put them up on my big screen TV. It looks like I'm watching you on NBC or something.
Yeah, just like that. Yeah, just like that.
But it's really fun to get to know the people that you think you know, and you probably do to some degree. But it's fun to hear their words and their story.
Yeah, and that's why we do it. As you said in the beginning, everybody's got a story.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of allowing them to tell it.
Yeah.
So what else about your story didn't we get out today that you'd like to tell? And anything crazy that that might be a Forrest Gump worthy type? Now I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah.
But it's okay. Nobody's watching now because we're approaching 2 hours. But I know you've lived a very interesting life, and we wish you were closer.
Well, I've told Kim before, especially nowadays with the political climate and stuff. I said, and I'd just like to get a little cabin out on the White River and raise a couple of hogs and grow some corn. And she said, I'm doing that.
No, I'm not doing that.
But I just Loogootee is a great place to come back to, and I hope to spend a little more time back here. Now that I'm pretty much retired.
You talk about the White River. And you saw out in the lobby, Hindoston Falls Days coming out October 1. I mean, our memories of Hindoston, from not just ours as little kids, but our parents and relatives in Boston was where you would go on a Labor Day.
Well, didn't you go over the falls one time fishing and Dad had to come in after you?
I don't know that I was fishing, but I do. And I remember we were swimming in our underwear. We were probably 5, 6.
No, that was just a week ago.
Yeah, well, last week. Yeah, well, I didn't exactly.
No, but I think I remember you.
Yeah, we did. I went in and that the whirlpool there has caught some people, obviously tragically.
Yeah.
And kind of thought it was going to catch me, and Dad came in and got me, but I was talking more about happy memories.
Well, I guess you made it.
I've made it. That's the happy point. So, I haven't even mentioned my wife. Lynn. I mean,
she's kind of become the matriarch of our family.
She really has, and she's so well loved in the community, and for good reason. And she had a brain surgery. And not all of you know this, but in 2015, because she had a couple of mini strokes. And Perry and Jim, so my daughter and son-in-law, and the kids all came up last night. They do this every year. They celebrate what we call a brain anniversary, and it's the anniversary of the brain surgery, which is actually today, as we film this. I think September 8th today. Yeah. And so she's doing great, and probably better than ever. But of course, I couldn't have found a better partner. As you said, you couldn't either. But I want to make sure we get everybody in there. And it's been a blast sitting here. I didn't know the turn it would take or what have you. And again, I tell people sometime, if you watch, you watch.
Yeah.
If you don't, you don't.
Yeah.
If you turn it on for 2 minutes or whatever. But I just felt it was important that Mark and I get together. At the alumni banquet about a month ago or so, Benny and Wendy Bledsoe were there. And Wendy was talking about every time she hears me speak, she hears you, because we sound so much alike. So I'll be curious, because a lot of these are to me, better when people just listen to them while they're driving, or they're listening to them while they're jogging or getting ready.
Yeah,
that's what I hear people do. And hopefully you can tell who's talking. He talks faster than I do, but I do see similarities. But that's what she said. She said, as you're talking, if I close my eyes, it would sound just like mine.
I get comments on Facebook when you're getting to know your Indiana neighbor. People that know me that don't know you will comment and say, well, you guys sure have similarities in your speech patterns and so forth.
Yeah.
And I want to say, too, I do live in Tucson. And for people in Loogootee, if you're ever in the area, Phoenix, Southern Arizona, or wherever, and you have extra time, I love getting together with people from home. Been lucky enough that people have come out to Phoenix, and I've had a chance to go down. I'll drive to Phoenix to have lunch with somebody, from home. So don't hesitate to reach out. And if you ever come to Tucson, it's a great place to hike. And it's Indiana is so beautiful, Southern Indiana in particular. And Arizona's, I miss the trees and the water, but it's got its own beauty. I mean, the mountains and the sunsets and things like that. So if you're ever out west, we'd love
Yeah,
to see you.
yeah, you'll regret that. But but anyway, that's no, it is beautiful out there. Um, it's just completely different. Many of you have been out
Yeah.
west, but the Tucson area in particular is really beautiful. I enjoyed so much going out there. Well, Mark, I hope that you got off your chest everything you wanted to.
I feel like I've gone to confession.
Good. Because you should on occasion.
I probably still should.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Mark.
Thank you, man.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Well, that's getting to know your brother, I guess, your sibling. But the next episode, the last episode, I guess, the recent episode of getting to know your Indiana neighbor. We're going to have some fun. Getting to know your Indiana neighbor is going Hollywood, by the way, here at the end of the month. We're going to visit Stephen Cooper out there, a Martin County native who's invited us out to a bucket list item, Dodger Stadium. And many of our family members are going out there. Kenny Greenwell, who, I mean, you talk about a historian for this area and the memories that he has. We're going to be talking to him as well. We've got a couple others lined up that I think you're going to enjoy. But thank you again for watching and persevering. What was it, like 6 hours and 3 minutes of Mark Bateman and Greg Bateman on getting to know your Indiana neighbor. Thanks so much.